In the previous lesson, we discussed supply chain attack methodology and why exploiting trust relationships is so effective. Now we're going to talk about a specific type of supply chain attack, software supply chain compromises. These involve compromising legitimate software during its development, build, or distribution process. The result is that trusted applications from trusted vendors contain malicious code that gets deployed to thousands or millions of systems. Software goes through multiple stages, from conception to deployment, and each stage presents potential compromise opportunities. Development environments where developers write code, source code repositories where code is stored and versioned, build systems that compile code into executable applications, testing and QA environments where software is validated, signing and certification processes that establish software authenticity, distribution infrastructure that delivers software to customers, update mechanisms that push new versions to installed applications. Each of these stages involves different people, systems, and processes. Attackers can target any stage that provides opportunity to inject malicious code into the final product. Attackers sometimes compromise individual developer workstations to inject malicious code at the source. Developers often have access to source code repositories, build systems, and deployment infrastructure. Compromising a developer's machine through phishing, malware, or credential theft gives attackers entry into the development environment. From a compromised developer workstation, attackers can inject malicious code directly into source repositories. They can modify build scripts to include malicious components. They can steal credentials and signing certificates. Because developers have legitimate reasons to modify code and access systems, malicious activity from compromised developer accounts blends in with normal development work. Source code repositories like GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket are central to modern software development, and they are attractive targets. Attackers compromise developer accounts through credential theft or phishing, and they exploit vulnerabilities in repository hosting platforms themselves. They submit malicious pull requests or commits disguised as legitimate contributions. For open source projects, attackers sometimes become trusted contributors over time, submitting legitimate contributions to build reputation before introducing malicious code in a later contribution that receives less scrutiny because of the established trust. This happened very recently. A nation-state actor, in fact, became a trusted developer as part of an open source project. For 2 years, he was just buddies with everybody and helpful until he finally performed the attack. Repository compromises can affect many projects simultaneously. If the attacker gains access to an organization's repositories rather than just a single project. Build systems transform source code into executable applications. Compromising these systems allows attackers to inject malicious code during compilation, even if the source code itself is clean. The SolarWinds attack involved compromise of the build system. The attackers modified the build process to inject malicious code during compilation. The source code in the repository was clean, but the compiled application contained malware. Build system attacks are particularly insidious because they don't leave evidence in source code that developers would review. The malicious code only exists in the compiled output that gets distributed to customers. Build systems often have access to signing certificates, allowing attackers to properly sign the compromised software so it appears legitimate. Verified good. Dependency confusion attacks exploit how package managers resolve dependencies between public and private packages. Many organizations maintain internal private packages for proprietary code while also using public open source packages. Package managers search multiple repositories and may have complex rules for determining which version to use. Attackers upload malicious packages to public repositories with names matching internal private packages. When developers or build systems attempt to install packages, the package manager might retrieve the attacker's public package instead of the legitimate internal one. This requires no breach or credential theft. just understanding of naming conventions and package manager behavior. Yet it can result in malicious code being incorporated into organizational applications. Typo squatting involves registering package names that are slight misspellings of popular legitimate packages. Developers who mistype a package name when installing dependencies might inadvertently install the attacker's malicious package instead of the intended legitimate one. For example, if developers commonly use a package called requests, an attacker might register requests or request, hoping that typos will result in installations of their malicious version. Because developers might not carefully verify package names when installing dependencies, and because legitimate packages often have unfamiliar names anyway, typo squatting can successfully compromise developer environments and applications. Popular open source projects often have small numbers of maintainers with permissions to publish updates. Attackers target maintainer accounts through phishing, credential theft, or social engineering. Compromising a maintainer account allows the attacker to publish malicious updates to legitimate packages that thousands of projects depend on. The Event Stream NPM package compromise in 2018 illustrates this. An attacker gained maintainer access to a popular package and published a malicious update that attempted to steal Bitcoin wallets. Because the package was widely used, the malicious code spread to many applications. Maintainers of popular open source projects are high-value targets, but often lack the security resources to defend against sophisticated attacks. Software distribution infrastructure, update servers, content delivery networks, download portals provide another compromise point. Attackers who compromise distribution infrastructure can replace legitimate software with malicious versions without ever touching the development environment. Users downloading from the official website receive malicious software because the attacker controls what the official website serves. All the code review, security testing, and secure development practices are bypassed. Certificate pinning, cryptographic signing, and secure distribution protocols help, but don't eliminate this risk if attackers compromise the distribution infrastructure itself, including the signing keys. There's an insightful observation from the computer scientist Ken Thompson in his Turing Award lecture, Reflections on Trusting Trust. He said, "Can't trust code that you did not totally create yourself. No amount of source-level verification or scrutiny will protect you from using untrusted code." Thompson demonstrated that even with complete access to source code, hidden malicious behavior could exist that inspection would not reveal. His example involved a compromised compiler that injected backdoors into programs it compiled, including inserting the malicious behavior into new versions of the compiler itself. His point was that trust in software requires trust in the entire chain of tools and processes that created it: the compilers, build systems, repositories, and distribution mechanisms. Compromising any link in that chain can result in compromised software, even when the source code itself is completely legitimate. Software supply chain attacks prove Thompson's observation. Organizations review source code, conduct security testing, and implement secure development practices. But if the build system is compromised, or the distribution is intercepted, or dependencies are malicious, all that effort is circumvented. Trust in software is fundamentally trust in complex systems and processes that create and deliver that software. Attacking those systems rather than the code itself is often more effective. Modern software uses digital signatures to verify authenticity, but code signing only works if the signing certificates themselves remain secure. Attackers specifically target signing certificates during supply chain attacks. With valid certificates, they can sign malicious code that operating systems and security software will trust as legitimate. The SolarWinds attack included properly signed malicious code. The Stuxnet attack used stolen valid certificates. Certificate theft is a common component of sophisticated supply chain attacks. Organizations must protect signing certificates with extreme care, storing them in hardware security modules, limiting access, monitoring usage, and immediately revoking if compromise is suspected. But even careful certificate management doesn't eliminate risk. If build systems are compromised, attackers can use legitimate signing processes to sign malicious code. Automatic update mechanisms that keep software current also provide attack vectors. If attackers compromise update infrastructure, they can push malicious updates to all systems running the software. These automatic updates often have elevated privileges necessary to modify system software. Attacks on update mechanisms have targeted various software, including browser extensions, mobile applications, desktop applications, and even operating system updates. The challenge is balancing security with usability. Automatic updates are important for security. They ensure patches are deployed promptly, but they also create trust relationships that attackers can exploit. Open source software presents unique supply chain challenges and opportunities for attackers. The transparency of open source, publicly available code that anyone can review, should theoretically make malicious injection harder, but the reality is more complex. Popular open source projects have thousands of dependencies. Nobody reviews all the code in all those dependencies, separately perhaps, but malicious code hidden in obscure dependencies often goes unnoticed. Open source maintainers are often volunteers with limited time and resources. They may lack sophisticated security practices. They're attractive targets precisely because compromising them affects so many downstream users. The open source ecosystem's strength, wide collaboration, and reuse also create systemic supply chain risk. SBOMs, software bills of material, are emerging as a partial solution to supply chain visibility. An SBOM is a complete inventory of all components in a software application: libraries, dependencies, versions, and origins. Think of it like an ingredients list for software. Software bill of materials allow organizations to know what components they're using, identify when components have known vulnerabilities, understand supply chain exposure, and respond more quickly when specific components are compromised. Regulatory requirements increasingly mandate SBOMs for software sold to government. The practice is spreading to commercial software, but these are only as good as the processes that create and maintain them. Automated tools help, but ensuring accuracy and completeness is challenging. Reproducible builds are a technique for ensuring that compiled software matches its source code. If builds are reproducible, anyone can compile the source code and verify that the output matches what the vendor distributed. This prevents attacks that compromise build systems to inject malicious code during compilation. However, achieving reproducible builds is technically challenging. Many factors can cause variation in compilation output: timestamps, random number generation, compiler versions, and build environment differences. The Reproducible Builds project has made progress, but many software vendors don't yet produce reproducible builds. It remains an aspirational goal rather than widespread practice. Various verification and attestation mechanisms attempt to provide assurance about software integrity. Cryptographic hashes allow verifying that downloaded software matches what the vendor published. Digital signatures verify the software came from the claimed source. Supply chain integrity tools track software provenance through the development and build process. But these mechanisms only work if the underlying systems generating the hashes, signatures, and attestations are trustworthy. If attackers compromise those systems, they can generate valid-looking attestations for malicious software. Verification provides defense in depth but not absolute security. Detecting malicious code injected during supply chain compromise is extremely difficult. The malicious code is often sophisticated and designed to evade detection, arriving through trusted channels that bypass security scanning and might be dormant initially, activating only under certain specific conditions or after widespread deployment. Static analyses analysis tools that scan code for malicious patterns often fail because the code is crafted specifically to avoid those patterns. Dynamic analysis that observes runtime behavior might not trigger the malicious functionality during testing. Some supply chain malware was present in victim environments for months before discovery, either through public disclosure or sophisticated threat hunting. When software supply chain compromise is discovered, incident response is extraordinarily complex at scale. The vendor must identify what versions are affected, determine the scope of the compromise, develop detection tools for victims, create remediation procedures, and notify potentially thousands of customers. Victims must then determine if they're affected, search their environments for indicators of compromise, assess what the attacker might have accessed or accomplished, remove compromised software while maintaining operations, and determine if moving forward with the vendor is acceptable risk. Coordinating response across thousands of organizations simultaneously while attackers may still be exploiting the compromise creates chaos that benefits attackers. Vendors face enormous pressure and difficult decisions when their software is used in supply chain attacks. They fear reputational damage and customer loss, and rightly so, because these things happen, and they face potential legal liability. They struggle with the balance of how much information to disclose and when. They have to balance transparency with avoiding panic, with avoiding creating panic, or providing attackers with useful information. Vendor response quality significantly affects overall impact of supply chain attacks. Organizations can take steps to reduce software supply chain risk, though perfect prevention is impossible. Maintain software inventory and SBOM software bill of materials. Monitor vendor security incidents and vulnerabilities. Use security tools that detect anomalous software behavior even from trusted sources. Implement application whitelisting, limiting what software can execute. And require security attestations and audit rights in vendor contracts. Diversify vendors where practical to avoid single points of failure. Implement zero trust architectures that don't automatically trust signed software. And test software updates in isolated environments before deployment. Monitor for unusual behavior in recently updated applications and have incident response plans specific to supply chain compromises. In the next lesson, we'll discuss more about managed service provider attacks.